T.S. Eliot. Dissociation of sensibility. Unification of sensibility. Another of the popular cliches of Eliot is the phrase dissociation of sensibility and its opposite, unification of sensibility. The phrase was first used by Eliot in his essay on metaphysical poets of the early 17th century. By unification of sensibility, the T.S. Eliot means a fusion of thoughts and feelings, a recreation of thoughts into feelings, a direct sensuous apprehension of thoughts. Such fusion of thoughts and feeling is essential for good poetry, but poetry results when there is a dissociation of sensibility, that is, the poet is unable to feel his thoughts. Eliot finds such unification of sensibility in the metaphysical poets and regrets that a dissociation of sensibility set in the late 17th century there was a split between thought and feelings, and we have not yet recovered from this dissociation. The influence of Dryden and Milton has been particularly harmful in this respect. Then the another point, that is the fusion of thoughts and feeling. In his essay on the metaphysical poets, T.S. Eliot explained how his fusion of thoughts and feeling takes place. Tennyson and Browning are poets and they think, but they do not feel their thought as immediately as the odor of a rose. A thought of done was an experience, it modifies his sensibility when a poet's mind is perfectly equipped for his work. It is constantly, and the ordinary man's experience is chaotic, irregular, fragmentary. The latter fails in love or reads this, that is the fusion of thoughts and feelings. Eliot does not regard Browning to be a great poet, for no doubt he has ideas, but he fails to transmute his ideas into emotions and sensations. Merely dry thoughts or logic do not make a great poet. The mature poet can experience or feel his thoughts as he does the odor of a rose. A bad poet cannot do so. Then another important point is that the classic and the romantic. T.S. Eliot was a classicist in literature and not a romantic, and one of his important contribution to literary criticism is that his reaction against romanticism and paved the way for the rise of neoclassicism. The anti-romantic and anti-humanist reaction began in the early 20th century, and its most powerful exponent in England was T.S. Home. T.S. Eliot completed the work which he began. The romantic placed an exaggerated importance on the human personality. They believe in the inspiration and refuse on the human personality. T.S. Eliot is a classical critic, but in one most important respect, he is different from the classical critic of the past like Dryden, Dr. Johnson, etc. The classical critic were concerned entirely with the process of creation or formulate a theory of literature. The Eliot, on other hand, has own theories of poetry and poetic talent. The function of criticism, the frontiers of criticism, and in number of other essays. Tradition. In the essay of tradition published in After Strange Gods, T.S. Eliot writes, tradition is not society or even primarily the maintenance of certain dogmatic beliefs. These beliefs they have come or take their living from in the courage of the formation of tradition. Here the T.S. Eliot speaks about the tradition, classic and romanticism, dissociation of sensibility, objective correlative, fusion of thoughts, and later on we have to see some of the points in short related to the poetic drama. While speaking about the poetic drama, we have Eliot's genius was essentially dramatic, and there is a strong element of drama even in his poetry. With the passing of time, the dramatic bent on his genius led him to concentrate all his attention on poetic drama. The greatness of Eliot as a dramatist may be a question, but there can be no denying the significance and value of his views on poetic drama. His views on poetic drama are contained largely in essay like The Four Elizabethan Dramatists, a dialogue on dramatic poetry, rhetoric and poetic drama, and poetry and drama. In order to understand his theory of poetic drama, it is essential to examine critically the view expressed by him in this essay. A dialogue on dramatic poetry was written in 1928 when Eliot was still feeling his way, so the view expressed are only tentative, nothing is asserted with any finality. In his latter essay, Eliot is more sure of himself and his views are expressed with a great self confidence. The dialogue was written as a preface to Dryden's discussion of the subject in his essay on dramatic poetry, and its form was suggested by Dryden's essay. It is the nature of a discussion between six persons from A to G, being Eliot himself. The form of the dialogue enables Eliot to discuss the problem of poetic drama from different angles. Different points of view are given, discussed, and ultimately some sort of consensus arrived. Here, while speaking about the same, we have secondly, after much discussion, it is agreed that the aim of the drama is not merely to provide amusement. Different dramatists may have different aims, but no dramatist can do without a moral attitude. Rhetoric and poetic drama. In the short essay written in 1919, Eliot examines the nature of the rhetoric and its place in poetic drama. In modern age, rhetoric is out of fashion. It is used as a synonym with the bad writing, Elizabethan and Jacobean plays are condemned as rhetorical. This is a mistake. We should first are condemned as rhetorical. This is a mistake. We should first try to understand the exact meaning of the word rhetoric. The amusement, yes, in the same as the assumption that the rhetoric is only a fault of manner, a kind of mannerism should be avoided. As a matter of fact, there is a rhetoric of substance as well as such a rhetoric is not so bad. True rhetoric arises when there is an adoption of our runners to the infinity variety of our thoughts and feelings on a variety of subjects. Means that the rhetoric arises when there is adoption of a manner, where he gives the reference of the Kid and the Marlowe. He says that the Kid and the Marlowe are merely bombastic and dull, for they lack the ability to make the such adoption. Where in the same we have the four Elizabethan dramatists, that is the Charles Lamb, William Archer, Swinburne, which the Eliot has mentioned, and the possibility of the poetic drama, where he gives some of the example of the Charles Lamb. Charles Lamb separated drama from poetry and pointed out that the poetic drama of Shakespeare cannot be staged. Such a separation of poetry and drama is wrong, but and unhealthy in its influence. In Eliot's opinion, there can be no separation of poetry and drama. For drama, it is one among several forms of poetry. This is a poetic drama. Poetry and drama. Poetry and drama is a lecture delivered by T.S. Eliot in 1950 at Harvard University. Not only it is a complete statement of Eliot's theory of poetic drama, it also throws a valuable light on the own dramatic practice. He has constantly talked and written about the drama and dramatist, and in his lecture he reviews, expound and analyzes his earlier opinion. Then we have Eliot's practice of poetic drama, that is the Murder in the Cathedral, which we have to see. Murder in the Cathedral. In the second part of the lecture, Eliot examines his own practice of poetic drama. When he took writing play, he realized that the experience he had gained in writing poetry will not be much help to him. The problem of communication is not so urgent in poetry as is an poetic drama. The dramatist writes with the immediate object of influence. Unknown and unprepared audience, and what he writes would be interpreted by unknown actors guided by unknown producers. Therefore, the artist has to practice great self control, always keep in mind the law of dramatic effectiveness. Murder in the Cathedral was the first play, and in this he had the advantage of cathedral was his having a subject from the remote period of history. This remoteness in time and picturesque customs of another age make a very easier acceptable. Moreover, it was a religious play. Then the another, that is the Family Reunion. It was also a poetic drama written by Shakespeare. The Cocktail Party was also written by William Shakespeare. It was the third play, The Cocktail Party. And at last, Eliot's own practice as a verse dramatist has convinced him that good poetic play come from poets learning to write plays rather than from prose dramatists learning to write poetry. In the modern age, verse drama will become acceptable only when it comes from the pen of those who have already acquired a reputation as a poet. Poetic drama is an ideal which is attainable. Constant exploration and experimentation is necessary for closer and closer approximation to this ideal. There is a fringe of indefinite feelings which cannot be expressed by prose dramatists. These feelings can be expressed only in poetic drama. With this, I conclude. Thank you. Good day.